Morning Detective, the podcast. I am your host, Gino Scala, and today we're going to watch part 3 of my interview with retired Detective Sergeant Troy Hillman of the Phoenix Police Department Cold Case Squad. We'll be discussing several of his cases, and but especially the Canal murder cases. And here is part 3. Thank you very much. Well, I know Colleen Fitzpatrick was involved with the genealogy, and she told you that the best she could do at that point was that the surname was going to be a Miller, correct? And it was going to be, she couldn't define which person, which Miller. Is that right? She didn't come back with Brian Patrick Miller as a name. She came back with just the surname.
She came back with a surname, but even that was phenomenal. I mean, Miller was I remember getting the call from her. It was over Christmas, and I remember she's like, "Hey, it's Miller, but it's not Smith, but it's a pretty common name." And so, but I couldn't wait to do what our folks at the VDoc Society said, which is our profiler, check the files. And sure enough, there were about 5 files that had Miller, and he was sitting there in those files. He had a particular file number, and I think the hair on the back of my neck stood up when I read that file.
Okay, I didn't know that. I know I had heard that you said, you were told that Miller or the suspect is going to be found in the files somewhere, but I didn't know if that was the case.
Yep.
So somewhere along the line, early detectives or early investigators interviewed Brian Patrick Miller himself?
No, that part I can't explain, but I will say that his name surfaced as a tip, and third hand, somebody had seen that bodysuit that he had redressed Melanie in '93 in his possession, or what they believed was the bodysuit. And then there was Brian Patrick Miller had basically ridden, I think it was 89 or 90, maybe it was when he was a juvenile. He had for whatever reason he got on a bus over from Metro Center, rode it to Paradise Valley, and ran up and stabbed a woman in the back, which was quite telling to me because both of our girls had been stabbed in the back, same type of stab wound. So he stabbed that woman in the back. He hung around the crime scene, was apprehended, spent some time in juvenile corrections for that particular attack. That woman survived, thank goodness. So that was in the file, coupled with, it was just, again, that file was a treasure trove of knowing what we had learned over that 3.5-year journey, of what to look for and what the profilers told us to look for. Although Brian Miller was we were looking for, based on the precision of these killings, and I use that word, we were looking for a John Rambo, a special forces, somebody that's very, very good with a knife, somebody that can spend a lot of time at a crime scene undetected, somebody that, we were looking for somebody potentially with a heavy military background. And I think once we saw pictures of Brian at that age, the scrawny guy, we just kind of were shocked. But again, the DNA, and it kind of proved it. So,
well, just some background on, it's not background on Brian, but for those that aren't familiar with this case, and I would encourage anybody once they hear this to look into this case. But they call it the Zombie Hunter murders because this guy was somewhat of a cosplay actor. I guess that's what they call him now, where they dress as a comic book character or some made-up character of their own. This guy predates the Walking Dead TV series where he was a zombie hunter. He had a vehicle painted as such, actually resembles a police vehicle, and I think he might have painted Zombie Hunter on it. He made a Gatling gun or some rocket gun, some huge, not cardboard tubes. I don't imagine. I imagine this was all metal and very intimidating. And physically he's a pretty big guy, I think, at least compared to the officers he was posing with. And he did make a point out of these, whether or not they were Comic-Con conventions or some kind of meetings with these types of characters. But there were a lot of online pictures of him posing with uniformed officers.
And so something the profiler said to us was a lot of these guys are above average intelligence, which Brian is, and they like to use what's called sarcastic ruses. And what he meant by, and it took me a while to wrap around this. Again, this profiler was brilliant, Richard Walter, but it took me a while to wrap around what he was trying to say. But them going back to a crime scene or posing with a police officer or hiding in plain sight is a sarcastic ruse. You are saying, hey, you're dumb. You police can't figure it out. I've been on the loose for 20 plus years, 30 years. You're dumb. I'm smart. And ha ha ha, I'm living this fantasy world going, part of steampunk, part of Comic-Con. And I'm taking pictures with you. And you have no idea what I've done to these females in the past. And it's almost a mockery. And I can tell I'm a little bit, makes me upset because it's kind of a play on I'll never get caught, you're stupid kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think the one personality trait beyond the psychopathy of the individual is the fact that they always think they're the smartest one in the room, and they always think they're smarter than cops in general. And it's funny, Ted Bundy was a clear example of that.
But it's almost a fantasy world. But I look back at it. He's a phenomenal artist. Like he is, I would put him up against anybody because I've seen a lot of his art, and it's just sad that he didn't use that for a greater good. And that kind of hurts me. And he also has a daughter. So that he was when at the time of the arrest, his daughter was 15, living with him. So there are certain disturbing parts. This is a kind of a sad story all the way around.
Right.
Other than the good part of it is we got him off the street and we got him behind bars, so he can't harm anybody else.
Right. I believe you. I haven't seen any of his art, but it's interesting to note that Charles Manson was an artist. John Wayne Gacy was very famous as an artist, or certainly in prison. And a lot of these guys have some kind of creative release as well. I just find that interesting. Yeah. I'm sorry.
They're photographers. They're painters.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of them keep a lair where and this was something that was drilled in by the profiler, basically where they can go and they have their pictures, their Polaroids. I think Dahmer did it. They have Polaroids of their victims because they can go relive the crime. Because something he told me is, he said, Troy, the crime is not done until the killer is done with the crime. So that they'll revisit the crime scene. They'll go back and watch. They'll videotape. Caught because they're smarter than everybody else, like we talked about. So it's disturbing that they have these talents and they don't use them.
Yeah. Now we talked a lot about this case because really the main reason is because you've written a book, and you've written a book specifically on the Canal murders. Or what do you prefer, the Canal murders or Zombie Hunter?
I prefer the Canal murders because that's what we call them.
Okay.
Once we found him and discovered who he is, that's when he kind of branded, I think the media kind of branded him as the zombie hunter.
Got it. Got it.
So certainly, yeah, it was the canal murders or what we referred to him as.
And I'm very excited that you have written this book. And but I was very intrigued by the fact, and I applaud you for not rushing it into publishing, because you're awaiting the outcome of the trial. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to do anything to endanger the trial. And these girls deserve justice. Their families deserve justice. And he deserves a fair trial. But it has taken 8 years, which has been a long time to not talk about the story. And I think what kind of drives the story for me personally, 2017, so we solved the murders in 2015. We were on cloud nine. I think the Phoenix Police Department was excited. The Valley was excited. This made national news. Everybody, again, kind of given up on it. I remember one of the detectives, the older detectives, retired, and he said, "Hey, this guy's dead. This guy's dead." And everybody kind of had that opinion. So when we solved it, it was not an idea, "Hey, we're going to shove this in anybody's face." It was an idea of, "Hey, this is a great story about never giving up. This is, to me, what cold case is all about, is somebody's got to be that last line of offense for and help these victims and their families. We can't just let them go at the 1 year mark. We need to keep fighting." So that was after. So we made this arrest. We flew back. We got a national award at the Chief of Police Conference in Chicago for excellence in criminal investigation. Everything was going great. We're firing on all cylinders, had an elite team, and then they started to cut. We demonstrated success. We came up with a great formula for cold case, and we just solved the canal murders. We just took a serial killer out of, he was living alive and well near 7th Street in Peoria, North Phoenix. We just took him off the streets. So that, I sat down and I fired off my first draft in 2017 of this book, because I wanted to tell the story of this elite group of talented detectives and how we as a team solved this very important case and took this bad guy off the street.
And that's really what the book is about.
Yeah, it is the journey of our squad, the journey of the team, how we came about, our kind of, and it is told in definite reverence for the girls. But I really didn't go into their backgrounds other than, kind of where they're from. But it's mainly about this team of detectives and all the trials and tribulations that we went through to chase the hunt for this guy. And I just had to tell the story. And I want to go talk to parents of murdered children. I want to talk to the different groups and kind of fuel this cold case. Needs to be a priority. Our leaders can't turn their backs on it. We can't stop funding DNA. We can't stop funding cold case squads. It's important. So that's what this is all about. And as you could tell, I'm very, very passionate.
Passionate, yeah. So what are you doing now?
I am retired, and if the right opportunity comes along, I'll probably, because I do have smaller children, younger families, so I may go work again. But as a hobby, I'm a cold case advocate and an author, and I'm trying to spread the good word that, again, cold case is important. We can't give up.
Thank you for watching part 3 of my interview with cold case detective Troy Hillman. Be on the lookout for part 4. Thank you and have a great day.